All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I say that, but I haven't really posted much. I really wanted to get down and draw some Pokemon or Fakemon art in relation to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I say that in the sense that now that we know what region or country it's based on, Spain or part of Spain, I wanted to use that as an inspiration. I don't really want to jump on the bandwagon, at least not for now yet, for designing starter evolutions and possibilities. There's enough of that going around, and I've seen some really amazing stuff. I thought it would be more fun to just kind of pretend that we don't know. Well, we don't know what kind of Pokemon we will be getting, but let's pretend that we were designing some potential Pokemon for this region, because knowing the country of origin now of influence, and we can do some research on the folklores or stuff that would be pretty interesting to work with and see what we can come up with. Just something fun to have, just something fun to play around with. Anyway, so excuse the noises in the background, by the way. I have constructions in the day, and then at night, now that it's quiet, actually, apparently there's something going on outside. I can hear some sort of police announcement about I'm guessing some missing person. Hopefully not a criminal, fingers crossed. Anyway, so that's going to be going on and off pretty much non-stop the whole time. Really sorry about that, but gonna have to deal with it. We make do with what we've got. So, alright, so looking at our character. So my first stage Pokemon, initially I was just setting out to start with one Pokemon and then see how we go. I didn't really think I was going to necessarily have a second stage, but I was looking at folklores of Brazil and seeing what really sparked my interest. And the first thing that I had come up with was El Coco. El Coco. Almost said the movie instead. El Coco. So it's I'll read an excerpt of one of the things that kind of sparked my interest. So it's a little bit dark, like some of the Pokemon who have like dark influences or origins, but obviously they're often played down and made cute, and that's kind of part of the fun and part of the challenge. So El Coco. Many Spanish parents spook their children by cautioning them about El Coco, a monster who snatches children away if they misbehave or refuse to sleep. And this is, it's got a lot of variations according to areas and also neighboring like countries and such. Going by similar names or slightly varied names, but they all kind of refer back to the same thing, or at the very least pretty much played the exact same role in their country. So its origins actually come from a man named Francisco Ortega. This is actually where I used the name. So Coco meaning sort of like referring to coconut, and Ortega, the gentleman's last name, is what I combined to get this Pokemon's name. But we'll talk about that more later. So Francisco Ortega, or El Moruno, who was sick with tuberculosis in the early 20th century. So he solicited help from a curandera, excuse my pronunciation, who recommended he drink the blood of children. Great. Ortega subsequently kidnapped a child named Bernardo in a cloth bag. Note that was one thing I used for the inspiration. So today, El Coco is said to still roam the streets with a black cloth bag, seeking disobedient children. That's kind of like the basic version. And then the version that I read, which was probably, we can say, is the full version with no... what's the word I'm looking for? It's not edited, let's say. Anyway, the one that I read originally is pretty much almost the same, but it did mention more details, like he cut the underside of the kid, or slit the underside of the kid to drink his blood, and then also apparently rubbed his fat on his chest. Another thing that I also took inspiration for the design. So I started off drawing sort of the nice round shape of a ball for the head. Something nice and cute. I wanted it kind of cute, but also kind of morbid and a little bit strange. I guess like a little bit like Mimikyu, you know that it's kind of creepy, but at the same time there is something cute about it, or something like it gives off like an eerie energy. Now I'm doing this because El Coco, the Coco kind of refers to coconut. It's a lot of people's description is that this figure or this mythology character is often seen as it has a very hairy face with indentations for the eye features, like its facial features are very similar to the indentations of a coconut, and that's why its name is that, and it's often referring to what it looks like, at least from the information about his appearances. And it's a man because of its origin, I guess. So it's a male character, but this is something we're gonna get into later on because it's gonna change. So yeah, so I started with that. I did some wonky eyes that were asymmetrical, kind of like think of like the forest spirits in Princess Mononoke by Ghibli Studios. It's like that kind of energy. They're kind of cute but kind of wonky and kind of eerie at the same time. That was what I was trying to use. So I started off by getting in there the 3 points for the indentations of the coconut, so I can kind of lay out where I want the faces to be. And then to make it a little bit like a big sort of eating big jaw kind of thing, I tried to make the fur on its mouth a little bit more like hairy features, but happen to be in the shape of a big jaw with big fangs, essentially. And then I had to start working on the body and sort of the proportions. I knew I didn't want it to be very tall. I didn't want it to be like a long, slender man kind of figure. That would be not cute and very creepy. Not to say that we can't do that for Pokemon, but maybe in another time. But what I had in mind was kind of like a stumpy leg. So I was trying to get the stumpy leg out and sort of get the proportion for the body. I didn't want it to be like overly top-headed, kind of like, like a baby Pokemon or anything like that. I wanted it to be like a regular kind of a slightly humanoid character. So the ratio was pretty much similar from the head to the torso and then the legs. And then I wanted the legs to be sort of the design similar to, I guess, what's the name? Suddenly can't remember the Pokemon name. Morwell. I guess a little bit like a slimmer Morwell, like how it's a bit like trouser or skirt like. So I was going for that. So stumpy legs with that kind of feature. Arms were kind of like the sort of a Munchlaxy kind of clawy kind of hands, I guess. I guess that's also similar to Morwell, actually. So I was going for that kind of generic sort of clawy, stumpy, chubby hands. And then I was back to working on the head. I needed a little bit more. I already had in mind basically the bag was going to be what it was all about, the cloth bag, and I wanted it to be incorporated so that it's not just like carrying a bag. I wanted it to be part of its head. I didn't want it to be sort of like a long ponytail right behind it and just like streaming along. That kind of idea is kind of already, that hairstyle is already kind of done by Zoroark, so I don't really want to do that again. So I thought it would be more interesting I've been really trying to focus on asymmetrical designs and paying attention to kind of playing up with stuff like that in my designs. So that was one thing I really wanted to practice with. So I gave it a lot more of those ruffled hair designs, but I made sure one side was a little bit more drastic to balance out one of the other opposite sides where I'm going to be extending out from the side of the face, sort of towards the back, so that it has a bit of that ponytail shape essentially, but it's kind of a weird in the face, extending out from his face fur or facial hair, growing into like a black cloth bag, if you understand what I mean. Anyway, so this was the main design. At this point I was also trying to work on the chest design, the allusion to the story where he rubs the child's fat on his chest. Obviously we don't want it to be too on the nose, so I was trying to get it so that it was a little bit like it was something that was more organic, kind of pattern that was imprinted on the chest rather than something that actually just slapped on and leaking on his chest. But it was really difficult to kind of get a design that I was happy with, because it was either a little bit too random or too strange, or it just didn't really look good on the design. So I was thinking more along the lines of what else could like symbolize something better. Would it be good if it was like a skull, but then sometimes that plays pretty well in Pokemon, but then sometimes it's also like the design is a little too on the nose and not as interesting. Like for characters like Duskull and his evolution line, it worked really well. So I thought, let's try it, but make it a lot less obvious so that it's a little bit influenced by the shape of a skull, human skull, but kind of abstracted. So you can see I'm playing around with that a lot, and just seeing like how far I can push it or how much I need to abstract it for it to fit in with the character design, because I wanted it to be pretty cute, and I also wanted a little bit more happening on the body to break up the color. Eventually when I get to that, I know that the body is going to be a little bit too empty without like a decent amount of design, but also we don't want to overclutter the design. I was watching a lot of videos from a variety of PokeTubers who do a lot of fan art, and they're very good at what they're doing already, so it's kind of like getting a crash course, you know. I watch a lot of them to begin with anyway, but it was good to kind of get a refresher. Anyway, so in the end I kind of got with like a sticking with the whole asymmetrical design. I kind of was balancing out even the chest design with a sort of warped skull shape. So anyway, that's the gist of it. And then eventually when I got to a cloth bag, it's basically just kind of like a small clump coming out from his right side of the face towards the back of the head, and then kind of becomes like extends into this massive bulky bag. I really wanted to get like that 3D feeling of like a big cloth bag, maybe already eaten some stuff inside. Doesn't have to be anything morbid, could be like berries and stuff, but I wanted it like already pretty bulky and puffed up. And then I guess I was trying to think, to make it look more like a bag tied up, I needed to put something in there, but I wasn't sure what to kind of put there, like strings and stuff. It seemed a little bit strange. I mean, I know Zoroark has kind of like a design feature that looks like, I guess it's like a bracelet kind of thing. I can't remember for the hair or fur on his back. So I didn't really think too much about it. I was just kind of trying to pen that part in so that I can come back to it later. The mouth I was trying not to put in like tooth pieces or tooth shapes at first, because I was a little worried that it would turn out to be a little too Pac-Man is the word I'm looking for. God, my brain, I must be so tired after all this drawing. But yeah, so I kept it kind of more like a flat sort of pincer shape, like a Kingler pincer. So like that's what I was doing for now in the basic sort of first mock-up sketch. Eventually you'll see that I come back to this because I wasn't happy with the pose per se. Like well, the pose was okay, and I liked that it was a little bit limpy and a little bit weird and kind of eerily staring at you with his head slightly tilted. And it was just a matter of adding a few more details, and with the body I actually ended up cleaning it up more rather than adding a lot more details. But with the cloth bags design, I wanted the mouth to be a little bit more obvious. Like I really wanted to enhance the features. I knew when I was watching some of the videos that a lot of the artists were talking about when you do stuff for Pokemon, because the designs are often a bit more simplified and they need to be a little bit more drastic, you need to really enhance what you're going for to make sure that it comes across. So, you know, essentially it's like picking what your main feature in that design is, what you're trying to communicate, and really, really enhance it and make sure that it comes across. So I knew that this wasn't good enough for the cloth bag. It wasn't really showing that kind of communicating the eating children. I mean, we're not trying to communicate the children part, but eating part was very important, and I really wanted that mouth motif to get in there. So I ended up eventually changing the angle of the bag so that it looked like the tip of the bag was a full-on mouth with the jaw sort of with the tooth pieces and tooth shape, but it was also kind of facing more towards the camera or the viewer so that it looks more 3D. I think that also really helps with the rendering of the picture eventually, which I also struggled a little bit. So that's what I got for now. And then from there it was just kind of adding some fine details. Initially I added some details for just kind of the way you color the design, or like yeah, kind of the way you color for the shine and shimmer on furs or fine furs on Pokemon. But I didn't really end up liking that design, so I'll change that later because I wasn't sure what that was there for. It seemed a little bit lazy, like a design for me. It filled in a bit of a space, but at the same time it seemed a little awkward anyway. But that was the basic design of it. I did kind of attempt to change up the pose a little bit, but honestly I was getting a little tired, and also I was running out of battery on my iPad, so I was like, you know what, I'm actually really happy with the design already. I don't think it needs to have an sort of a more dynamic pose. Actually this pose was perfect for this character, so I thought I'd focus my energy on working on the evolution of this Pokemon. So I mocked up some colors quickly for the first stage, and I knew like it was going to be some shade of black. And with the influence of coconut, I chose a very coconut-like color for the majority of the base body color, and then I wanted white because of like a skull, like death motif to come through in the white patch of the chest. Obviously because the boy was pretty dead by that point, I would assume. Just for like a little subtle nod, and then break up the character a little bit of contrast because it was all kind of earthy colors. And then for the main fur and the body bag, cloth bag, I went with a black but slightly lighter shade, and also just a more browned kind of tone to basically tie in the whole design together. Oh, and one of the things they said, the eyes are often in a lot of accounts for the stories, the eyes were red, so glowing red. I went with a simple red first. Later on I do add more details to it because it just didn't seem very Pokemon to like do an eye this simple. There are Pokemon with like one blob of eyes, but a lot of times the eyes itself have some form of detail or some sort of light reflection, so I thought it was a little bit more Digimon than Pokemon essentially at this stage, so I knew I was going to have to come back and fix that. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. So I wanted to read a little bit about the other influence. So this character has been also imported, well, adapted into different cultures, and from readings in general, another very popular adaptation is in Brazil. In Brazil, they have sort of a similar character with an almost similar name but different influence, and they tie in pretty well together, so I kind of combined these two and made it into a line. So this one's called the Kuka. So unlike the first El Coco, our first stage is inspiration, this one is only female. So I'm decided at this point that I was going to make this stage, this line, they can only involve if it's a female. So it's one of those lines, a bit like what's the name, Salazzle. Anyway, so one of the best known Brazilian legends is that of the Cuca, an ugly old woman who appears in the form of a humanoid crocodile and robs disobedient children. The creature sleeps only once every 7 years, an element which parents often use to scare children who don't want to go to sleep. There's a few more backstories where it's kind of related. It has like a sort of as an origin or stemming from tales that relate to also dragons. So there is a bit of a dragon. There is a little bit of dragon influence in this. I wanted like that crocodilian but slightly dragony kind of look, and that's where the mane and the hair really comes in. And like this character apparently also has the ability to shapeshift. These were all like sort of just things I was noting down to either play into the character design or into like sort of the abilities and dex entry, like those kind of informations, just to make the character come alive in all sorts of ways. Anyway, so when I first started designing, I think this stage was the most difficult one. I had to redo it because I wasn't happy with it. It seemed very awkward and very just tacky. It just seemed kind of like a very generic design. You know, like when sometimes you draw something and you're like, it's good, but it's not great, and it's just kind of boring. There's nothing really interesting to look at, and you feel like everything is good concept but executed poorly. So I knew that I wanted the like a white skull, kind of like the crocodilian look on top. The hair was going, the mane or the hair was going to transform into more like a fur sticking out from the middle of the, kind of like bursting out from the skull. And I guess the skull, since it's kind of like a skull shape on top originally is my idea, then it would be the eyes kind of just like slightly showing through the hollow mask, kind of like Cubone, but with more creepy eyes. I was thinking maybe color-wise I might do a more drastic change. Some Pokemon keep like the same color scheme, or and like move into darker tones, that kind of stuff, or some of them just keep pretty much the same colors and move around the different parts of the body. Some of them have more drastic color changes, and I thought maybe with this alligator humanoid character I should maybe shift the colors a little bit and make it more like a swampy green color. And I knew, instead of the, so carrying on the same idea of eating being one of the most important things I wanted to communicate, I wanted to change the mouth on the body cloth bag, the black cloth bag on the hair, into more like a sort of like a hairy mane at the back of the hair, like a big bulk of a big mass of hair, and then extending out to like a long Smeargle like tail. But at the end, instead, we have a spoon to allude to, you know, the story origin of the Kuka kidnapping children and essentially eating them by cooking them into soups and stuff, and carrying around a spoon, which was one of the things that was noteworthy from some of the things that I read. Again, I also tried to use, I wasn't sure what kind of body shape and how big I wanted this character. I felt like it needed to be slightly taller, a bit stronger, maybe like really big chunky arms, and legs were, I wanted it maybe like a little bit top heavy. That was what I was thinking. And I think like the hairs on sprouting out of its skull could look a little bit like the, what do you call it, like the spinal kind of hairs, or like scales that stick out from the dragons and alligators. I thought that could be kind of like a cool influence to make it look a bit like that. I wanted to change up the pattern on the chest a little as well. And I think when I was sketching it, like I accidentally kind of made the nose on the skull a little bit, I think it was like the two side nostrils. I ended up making it too big, but I ended up really liking the shape of it, so I kept that design in the end. And I exaggerated the patterns, which I didn't like, on the legs and the arm. So that ends up getting scrapped because it was just such a lazy design. It was just not really doing anything for the character at all. Like, I didn't think it was really communicating anything. So at this point, when I finished coloring, I was basically starting to tweak around with the color a little bit, because having done the line art, I kind of just wasn't that happy with the character, but I thought I would just try to change up the color and just make sure that it wasn't the color throwing me off, and the green just wasn't working. And because these two Pokemon, the two stages, like some specific Pokemon, is such a drastic change because of their lore, it was not very helpful to have such a different color scheme. It just made them more disconnected than ever. So I was thinking, okay, I either need to shift the design a little bit, or I definitely need to change the color. So the easiest thing was to just kind of shift the color a bit darker, but using more browns to emphasize that coconut and its like origin compared to the first one. But it just seemed very strange, like the whole proportions and all that were kind of off. So I knew I would need to start all over for that one, but I needed to take a break because honestly I had no idea what I was doing. I ended up thinking maybe I could break up the colors a bit more, make it a bit more interesting, and I thought, okay, let's do white patterning, sort of like in a way like a jaw, kind of like a Dusknoir. It's like belly part opens up like a giant gaping mouth. If I can create that kind of illusion, not that her belly actually opens up, but I wanted that kind of motif. So I tried doing that, and that was just, it was more dynamic, but it was not a good design. I didn't like it. So I decided at this point, take a break, and let's move back to the first stage. At this point, I already knew the name. I wanted the first stage, influenced by El Coco, to be called, let me get the name, to be Cocote. So it's in obviously referring to El Coco, the coco, and the Cote is referring to Ortega. So the Orte part of the name of the person who was the murderer. So yeah, and so Cocote, I'll be using his name from now, so just to help differentiate the characters. So when I went back to Cocote, I wanted to round out the hair design a little bit more. I knew that it was just a little bit weird, like it was round but a little too asymmetrical in places, that it was missing some like little ragged bits of the hair that kind of was needed to balance it out. So I touched that up a little. For the eyes, I knew definitely needed work. That was one of the first things I really wanted to make it fix, because I know that was what was throwing me off and making it feel like it wasn't quite a Pokemon yet. So getting some inspirations from existing Pokemon, I started by adding a bit more depth to the eyes so that it feels like it's a bit more 3D when it gets to the actual rendering. So I gave it like an extra ring of black eyes, sort of like marking around its eyes. I wanted to layer up the eyes, the red, a little bit more, so it was a little bit more of a contrast and feels less of just like a blank sheet of color. So I gave it another ring of a darker, deeper shade of red, and I had to look at that. Still seemed a little bit weird, so I ended up coloring it a bit more to make it more like one of the, I guess, like Gen 1 kind of designs in a way. I guess it's a little bit more like Gen 3, kind of taking inspirations from Pokemon like Duskull, all those kind of later generation Ghost Pokemon. So I was at this point just playing around with whether I wanted colors or if I wanted lining to make it a little bit more dynamic. So at this point I was thinking, should I make it like contrasting white on the eyes? But then I thought a lot about the character, and like I wanted to make sure I think about how the character is in the environment. It'd be like hiding in the alleyway, on the streets, like walking and strolling at night, just kind of creepy and eerie. I don't think this character would have too many dynamic sort of looking colors that strike people. Like the whole idea is having like a dark covered kind of head. In general, the head should be like quite dark and then just the eyes glowing through. So I thought using white probably didn't make a lot of sense, but I didn't want to complicate the color scheme too much. So I said, all right, let's just do similar dark black brown kind of color. Let's make a tone in between just to add a tiny bit of variation to the color palette, in terms of like the shades, and that really worked really well. And then once that came into place, it started feeling a lot more natural as a Pokemon. At this point, I wanted to start coloring in and adding in the shading just to get a feel for how complete this design is. And then to make it, I feel like this Pokemon could be a little bit more cute. So I was like, let's give it a go and give it a little bit of a dot for refraction in the eyes to make it a little bit more sort of cute and adorable, just to make it a little bit more eerie and cute. And that worked really well. So from that point, I think it really started coming alive, the character. I started working on shading, giving it the light highlights, and when I did most of that, I was pretty happy with almost everything, but this was the point where I knew I wasn't too happy with the green in this color scheme. I just felt like it was very, for some reason, it really reminded me of Pokemon, Digimon, and I really didn't like it. And also, it was just kind of random having the green and the white, like apart from just alluding to the next stage. For what I've already designed at this stage, it didn't really do anything. So while I was doing this, I also watched a lot of videos from other PokeTubers just to make sure that I can see a little bit more about how they were rendering and how they were doing it, how simple or how complicated they were making it, just to know like how much I needed to do. And then as I was coloring the hair piece or the black cloth bag, that was when I was kind of realizing that, oh yeah, I needed to change this. This is not the design I wanted for that part, and it was just not dynamic enough. It was just the whole body kind of slumping there was great for the character, but the hair needed to be a little bit more eerie and kind of like, is it sentient? Is it alive? That's kind of what I wanted to communicate. So I made it kind of more like it was floating in the air. I ended up kind of deciding that I did want to change up the design a little bit. I felt like maybe I think while I was kind of deciding on whether I was completely happy with the design or not, that pretty much made me realize that I probably wasn't, if I was even considering that to begin with. If it was a great design, I probably would have been like, that's amazing straight away. And as I was watching the other PokeTubers to take specifically like Subjectively and True Green 7, I was listening to what they were saying, and one of the things that Jack from Subjectively always said was that he had a big emphasis on he really enjoyed how Pokemon, when they evolve, the evolution isn't just adding features and all those kind of stuff. It's also a big part of it in every design, and even in the main official Pokemon, is often the change in personality. They grow more confident, or there's always a shift in that in the design as well. So I was like, okay, personality is it's just a little too neutral. So I needed to change up the body plan just a little bit. Maybe make the hands were a little too generic. So I wanted a little bit more humanoid to just add a little bit more of that slightly eerie and something feeling a bit off about the Pokemon. When things are like a little too similar, there's a term for it, when things are a little too similar to people. Anyway, so I added more like sort of humany, kind of bony, kind of fingering, finger parts to the otherwise pretty seamless and smooth, furry kind of like arm parts. And I changed up the stance a little bit so it looked more like it was standing apart and a little bit more like in the middle of waving someone to ask them to come closer, or about to like get someone's attention. And yeah, I really liked it. And I felt like it was a little bit strange having so much detail in the eyes without it actually having a bit of the line art, so I added that in as well. And I think that just made everything come together really well. I gave it a little bit more details on some part of the body just to make it feel like it was more cohesive with the texture of the head being a little bit more like hairy. I wanted the legs to be kind of like not claws, because I thought that was a little bit too common in a lot of Pokemon, so I was wondering if I could play around with I guess we can call it like the claws, or the nails, a little bit more like make it round, or make it a little bit more like little toe beans. I don't know what to call them. Eventually to tie it in with the fingers, I just made them sort of more like cute toe beans, but like slightly more claw shaped, elongated, kind of more like oval bean shapes, I guess. And that really kind of tied in that kind of slightly weird bony humanoid character design. So I was really happy with that. And I feel like a lot of designs don't necessarily use a lot of like straight up white. Even the white kind of colors are often toned towards like shifted towards a particular color or shade. I think it just probably adds a bit more to the character usually. So I did end up changing the white to almost white, but just a little bit more on the brown pastel side, so that there was a little hint of color, just so that it wasn't also like that much in your face, because it then kind of didn't go very well with the rest of the body of the character. It was almost like it was jumping out a little too much. And from there, I think the whole thing became a lot more just a little bit more easy on the eye and really seamless and nice to look at. And I really liked how I changed the mouth of the mouth on the cloth bag, really kind of floating in the air, slightly sentient on its own. Kind of makes sense to make a design like that. Kind of really ties in with kind of like works really well, a bit like Pokemon such as Girafarig, Wobbuffet. I think that makes it a little bit more believable as a Pokemon. I think the eyes are kind of a little bit more unusual for Pokemon, but actually when you think about it, it's probably a little similar to Pokemon designs like Noibat. I think the eyes really resemble that kind of Pokemon design. So yeah, I think in the design process, the hardest thing is because you're designing and you know that this is a Fakemon in a sense while you're designing it. It is a little bit more difficult sometimes because you don't know how far you can deviate from like the template essentially. Now that the first character is down, the time has come and we must move on to the evolution, which was a lot of work because it was pretty much, I hated it. It was all wrong. Alright, so there was no getting around it. This character had a lot of concepts and features and ideas that I really enjoyed, like especially the snout was like the part I really enjoyed and I really wanted to keep that shape, but I knew that the best way to get this Pokemon right was to just delete the whole thing and start from scratch, and also start with working on a really good pose. I watch a lot of subjectively's art designs, and another thing Jack does really well is he works with silhouettes and also postures, and what really makes a character feel really alive is often the pose and the dynamic sort of energy that it gives. It doesn't have to be like super energetic, it could be like a lethargic energy, like it depends on the Pokemon's personality, and that was really important. And for me, I knew I wanted a lot more shift in the energy for this Pokemon to feel like some sort of change. And this evolution does imply a lot of differences in its like manners and like its influences, its origin, a lot of things I want to communicate. So I knew the skull was one of the most important parts I needed to communicate, because its features as a dragon, as an alligator, and its shift in typing, its personality being a little bit more kind of like less waiting to hunt, but kind of more aggressively out there searching for, and better to hold its own ground. I wanted to communicate all that. So I started off working on the skull the most because I knew it was going to be, I wanted to turn it on an angle but kind of facing the viewer so that the jaw was kind of in your face, but I didn't want it to be like a Digimon character where the mouth was gaping open and kind of like it's charging towards you, because that's not really the kind of character that Kuka, oh my god, I forget the name, Kuka, the Kuka is. She comes and grabs disobedient children and she cooks them. I had like that kind of more like the villains like in Hansel and Gretel, you know, like the witches are kind of, they approach you but they're not seemingly evil right on the spot. They kind of lure you into the situation, and then once the timing is right, then they kind of take the bite, let's say. So that was kind of the energy I was going for. So I wanted like a confident character that was Just you knew it was powerful, but it wasn't like it was seeping with evil. You just know that it was powerful. And yeah, so I was trying to work out the snout shape on that angle, and it was really difficult, and it was sometimes a little bit phallic, to be honest, when you weren't doing it right. And then the hardest thing next was the eyes. It just, once I got the snout right, or roughly in the angle that I wanted, in that angle, I don't know how to do the head, the skull, the shape, which was something I was trying to practice anyway. So I was really trying to work out, okay, I need to work out and block the shapes, get the snout flat, and then there's the round head. So I ended up turning the head just a touch closer towards the side, just so that I could work out the angle a little bit better, and also like the body shape. And you can see I do a lot of passes for this character compared to the first one, because pretty much I knew some of the features I wanted, but I didn't know exactly how they should be. Like the eyes, I didn't know how they fit into the skull, if it was going to be like a skull, or was it going to be like a pattern that was part of the head. And the like the white design is more like a fur color, like a fur change, rather than like a thick skull stuck on the head like Marowak and like a Cubone. And then the hair sticking out of the skull, was it going to be like, if I wanted it to kind of be like the scales on the back of like a dragon or the alligator, then do I want them really like linear as a design, or was I going for something more messy? Because I was really enjoying the kind of alternating weird, let's say like jagged and different messy kind of organization of the fur in the first pass when I was doing it for the design I didn't like. That was one of the things I wanted to keep. And I was trying to add in a bit more features that made it a little bit more crocodilian, but also like slightly dragony. But I wanted the crocodilian energy to come through a little bit more, so I was taking a lot more inspirations from like Crocodile, Totodile, and seeing how their body proportions were, and what kind of design features they did, what kind of body shape they were in. So you can see I work on the eyes quite a bit, and then eventually I try a few more angles trying to get the shape a little bit more, because I wanted it to be showing that it was using the hair as a hair spoon, as a spoon, and kind of like about to drink soup from it. So I was trying to work out the angle for that, and also just to position the spoon so I can see exactly where the whole body is going to be and how everything's going to fit into the image. Finally, I managed to get a shape in and finally have the sort of a diamondy shaped, sort of like 3 diamond shapes as the snout. And then I finally got the design in, and I, instead of opening the snout to make it a little bit too aggressive, I kept it shut, and I started working on the eyes. Just what I did was essentially make the eyes a lot simpler first, so that I get the shape and the position in, and then kind of get the energy of the personality right. And I think this was where it was starting to coming together, because I knew that getting that emotion in actually helped a little bit easier to understand whether what direction I should take the eyes in. And then I knew I wanted to keep that energy of like the sort of like the teeth and mouth. I really wanted to run through the character a lot more, but without overdoing it. So I added a few more teeth marks to the head design, to make it more like it was wearing sort of like a skull piece, rather than just everything sitting on its face. I would say it is, for me, in the end, the decision was it is wearing, the character, this Pokemon is wearing sort of like a skull piece that is fused in a way to, so it's sitting on the head, but it's fused to its jaws. That's why you can see some definite disconnected areas, but also where like there's, it's not seamless, but you can see like there are areas where it connects rather than kind of separates, if that makes any sense. And then I started working on the eyes. I wanted the eyes to use similar shapes and designs from the first form, but make it a lot more, basically the opposite, make it less cute and sort of like slightly kind of creepy to look at. So when you meet eyes with it, you know, like the way it stares at you, it just makes you slightly uncomfortable. So I made it more like that kind of hypnotic ripple eye design. And obviously no highlights for this one to make it a little bit more with that energy. And I like the kind of belly design often used on like Dragon Knight has that kind of design, so I use that on the snout because I really like that kind of tiled effect, kind of make it look a bit more scaly, but without adding too much those details to complicate the face. And then I tried to flatten out the face a little bit more to get the shape more alligator-like. And I think alligators and dragons actually have a very similar energy, so when you kind of abstract the shapes for the two of them, they kind of end up looking pretty easily like each other, so that was really good for this design. The next thing was working on the hair. I didn't want it to look like it was a bird because I noticed that when you were doing the hair or the fur on the crown of the head, doing it wrong in the wrong positions or like bundling them up too much made them look more like a prehistoric land bird or chicken or anything along that line. So I was thinking, okay, I want the head, I know that I want the bunch of hair to stick out from like the crown of the skull, so it's like almost like it's bursting out, and I know to tie it in and make it feel more like the first stage, it needed a bit more of a similar hairstyle, like something more voluminous and bulky. But I didn't want it to feel like it's still holding a bag, but I did want like some of that volume to translate over. So essentially it was mostly just figuring out the right angles and trying to see it more as a 3D shape rather than just drawing the outline and making it 2D, which is one of the problems I often have when I'm designing these Pokemon. So once I figured that out, it was a lot easier to get the shape right. And when I was like considering where it's coming out from the head and what part of the so it's all the 3D shapes basically was what I was trying to work with. And I just made it kind of like slightly extending to a mane or chunk of hair at the back, but because it's such a at this point I knew I wanted to make the figure kind of a bulky character with a big body, so I didn't want the hair to be taking up too much of the focus. I actually wanted a little bit more dynamic and power emphasized in its lower half, like a little bit more bottom heavy if anything. So I played around with the hair a little bit, and then obviously got it to a stage where I was happy with it being just the right length, where it's kind of voluminous and feels a bit like it matches with the first stage, but not enough to take away all the design elements from the facial features, because I really wanted people to focus more on the expression of the character. So next thing we really needed to work on was the position of the body, which honestly at this point I haven't given much thought apart from just knowing that I wanted to be a little bit stronger, a little bit maybe bulkier, but I wasn't sure, was the legs going to be a similar shape, was it going to be like the kind of like the how would you describe it, kind of like almost like a old, what do you call those, bell trouser shaped jeans, like that kind of shaped legs, or was it going to be more like a Dragon Knight kind of legs? I wanted like to figure out that part, the proportions, how long was the body going to be, was it going to be like Crocodile, quite a elongated body and a really bulky legs, like what was I looking for, and how long did I want the arms? Did I want it like really strong, muscular, but kind of like lanky arms, like really long and draping down the side? And when I kind of randomly sketched the right arm, that kind of helped it come together, because it was like kind of like a dynamic pose where it was like holding it behind its face and kind of covering it itself a little bit, almost like it's about to do something. striking a pose and ready to launch an attack or something. And then the other hand I knew was going to be trying to grab the spoon so it looks like it's using its body part to really showcase like what this character was all about. Legs were pretty weird the whole time. No matter what stance it was, I couldn't quite get it right because it was a little too rigid or too straight, and it wasn't very fluid, which was one of the things I really enjoy about some of the designs I see from other PokeTubers, where the characters are positioned really well and the body flows in a really organic way. So I was trying to work that into the design a little bit, and it only worked out finally when I realized that it needed to be kind of like a slender torso from like a flat, bulky head to a really nice, plump and strong kind of dragon Pokemon type of leg and thighs. It's like the kind that is seen in pretty much the Pokemon types like Dragonite, Sliggoo's evolution. Suddenly forget the name, but you know. So that was what really got it together. And then one of the last things I also had to consider was, okay, I got the sort of the main body plan down and the stance is perfect now. Does it need, it's already got something long and flowy, which is the spoon, and that catches a lot of attention. I don't want a complicated design anymore, and I don't want too many like extra features because then the colors are going to complicate things as well. Did this character need a tail? Because alligator, dragon, I mean, that is communicated enough with the facial features. Having an extra tail, even a short one, like feel like, yes, it might balance out the character possibly if it seems a little bit strange, but it's meant to be a humanoid character, and I like that the little details where it's like something is actually a little off, not necessarily missing, but something is a little off and a little bit odd. Like you expect this kind of character to possibly have a tail, but it doesn't, and yet that long spoon hair thing kind of covers that area, so it kind of still makes everything really seamless. So I decided, after testing it out just to be sure, I already knew pretty much that I probably wouldn't need it, and yeah, when I was testing out the tail a few times, I didn't really like it, so I ended up opting it out because it kind of cluttered the design a little too much, and it didn't really add anything to what or was already well done in the design. And for the chest design, it was pretty easy from there. I knew I just wanted to make everything a little bit stronger and a little bit more, I guess, like, I don't think the word morbid suits, but make everything a little bit more obvious, more power, more sort of more glare, more attitude, and more personality. So with the chest design, I just made the sort of the eyes of the skull shape kind of show through and make it a little bit more obvious. And I made it a little bit more melty because, you know, sticking with the same design of like fat being wrapped on the body and it kind of melting down the chest and making it abstracted just makes the design a little bit more interesting, a little bit more stuff to look at. From there, it was just finalizing the details and using drawing out the line art, cleaning out everything, and making the details a little bit more, just getting the shape right and fixing all the details. I think the hands and the legs and the feet were probably some of the most interesting parts to play with for this character in particular, because it was part humanoid but also kind of a monstrous beast, and I didn't want it to be too much of the generic like claw feet and stuff. I wanted to kind of play with those but make it a little bit different. So for the hands, I took the same inspiration for Kokote, and I made them sort of like the bony sort of design, but then made them a little bit more like long bony claw-like features, made them very elongated, but I also kept them almost a little bit more fluid, so it felt a bit more fleshed out, and that made it a little bit more like there was a little bit more of a soft touch and a little bit more organic, a little bit more flexibility to kind of like show that this character can do a lot more stuff now, and it knows what it's doing, and it's able to grasp more things, you know, take more actions. and that worked out really well for the character. And I balanced it out by having that kind of slender body, bulky legs, but then like like slender body and bulky what do you call it, bulky limbs. And I felt like that really gave the character the powerful feeling of power, where its slender arms extend into this like top heavy fist, if you know what I mean. And then for the claws and the legs, basically I was just working with trying to do a kind of crocodilian dragony kind of claw feet, but then I wanted it a little bit more flat, so it was kind of flat to the ground, showing that all the weight was sinking to the bottom of the body, but didn't want like actual white claws or anything, because I wanted it a little bit more toned down so that it didn't distract too much from all the design that was mostly happening in the top half of the body, where all the personality is as well. Coloring for me was super easy for this second stage, for this final stage evolution. I knew I wanted the skull to be the same sort of bone fleshy light brown color that I used for the first stage. The eyes were going to be darker, similar colors, but choosing only the darker tones used in the first stage. And for the body, I wanted to make sure I played around with it so that it had enough contrast, so that things weren't blending together, because for this character it's using a lot of the same body colors, but its body mass is so much bigger now that I really need to make sure that things don't end up blending together into one mass. So I wanted the character to feel a bit like more sinister and darker, but like kind of like evil energy contained inside, and it's like plotting something. So to communicate that, I used the darker shade of its body color from the first one and used that as the belly color to kind of tie in with its underneath of its jaw, and also kind of break up the whites in the skull. That gives it a little bit more of that crocodilian or reptilian feature, and that also will help contrast and bring out the chest pattern a little bit. And then to keep things a little bit more simple and a little bit more essentially I took the normal body color of the first stage and used it for the majority of the body of the character, because there was a lot going on in the face again, so I didn't want to take too much away from that and clutter the design too much. So it's essentially very similar design to Marowak's kind of body coloration, but because there's a lot of white going on, so it needed that extra tone of darker brown to break up the character's silhouette a little bit more. So apart from that, the color scheme used is essentially the same. I was looking into a few color Pokemon just to make sure that it was a thing, and I looked at Cyndaquil in particular. I remember that Cyndaquil was one of the Pokemon that, despite its kind of pretty drastic changes as it evolves, its color scheme almost on the body and the patterning and locations of things were actually all pretty much exactly the same, apart from its eyes changing a bit more drastically from no eyes at all almost. So that's what I was referring to. So that's one of the inspirations I was drawing from. So I kept the color scheme relatively simple to help contrast the face and everything and like the fur going on, and I just added more details to the head, to the hair, and then I used kind of a much harsher lighting for this character. It really helps bring out the typing of this and the sinister sort of to bring out the typing and the sinister personality and the potentials of this Pokemon. So I bring you So with that, I bring you Kukanoa. which is basically just the combination of Kuka and an dragon in dragon and continua, which is the dragon translation for Spanish. So it's just the combination between that and you get Kuka-Noa. And with that, the design is done. I'm sorry if I ramble a lot because I'm not working off a script this time because it's pretty spur of the moment and pretty late, and I don't really have time to work on this one anymore. So I really wanted to get out there for you guys. Yeah. So what do you guys think about this design? Do you like it? And do you think the design is cohesive enough between the two? Is it too big of a change in character? Or is it okay knowing some of the inspirations and the lore behind the character? It's drinking tomato soup, by the way. That's just soup, not blood, in case anyone was wondering. And I also have some extra additional information or ideas that I came up with in terms of like the dex entry or sort of move and abilities for these two characters. For these two Pokemon. So let's start with Kokote. So Kokote is a pure dark type and it has an ability called Snag. My idea for this was Snag is an ability where any HP draining moves used on Kokote will deal damage, but it does not give the HP back to that user. So say if someone's using let's say Draining Kiss or Leech Life and takes away 30 HP, the 30 HP damage will be dealt on Kokote, but 30 HP will not be added to the opponent. The idea behind it was I thought it would be a good sort of nod to how he was trying to prolong the origin. Francisco was trying to prolong his life by drinking the blood, the life essence of another person, of a child. But I guess ultimately it probably didn't really do anything for him and just turned him into a monster. So the damage is still done, but there is no actual recovery. So it's kind of like that idea, but in like reverse in a way, because the damage is dealt by the opponent. Initially, I also considered maybe it'd be a good idea to do just stats, but I thought HP and the relation to life and energy, it made a lot more sense to do something with the HP rather than just the normal stats, and we have enough of the stat moves. And next we have Kuka-Noa. So Kuka-Noa, let's talk about the evolution, like how it evolves into Kuka-Noa first. So for Kokotes, only females can evolve into Kuka-Noa. And a Kokote evolves at night when an opponent is defeated by draining the entirety of its HP with any HP draining moves. And one of the moves I came up with for Kokote to learn is Guzzle. It's a new HP draining move that has a 30% chance of lowering target's defense stats by one stage. Kind of like the idea that you're, drinking the life essence of a Pokemon. And obviously when someone's attacking and draining your life essence away, you kind of eventually become weaker and weaker and you lose your defense in the situation. Obviously it can learn other moves as well, like Leech Life, all that works for his typing. And so long as it's a life draining, HP draining move, then if you defeat the opponent completely by draining all of its HP in that battle, then after that battle, Kokote will evolve into Kuka-Noa. Okay, now let's talk about Kuka-Noa. So Kuka-Noa is a dark dragon type. So I wanted to make it really interesting and make it a lot more powerful. And I thought dark dragon type felt really mysterious and really alludes to the sort of alligator dragon energy, which the lore had a lot of connection to. And then I wanted to tie in its other main thing that was talked about in a lot of pop culture and its laws, which was shape-shifting. So I wanted to make the ability shapeshift. So this new ability is, if Kuka-Noa has learned the move Manifest, which is its special move, For the first turn and only once per trainer battle, when she is sent out, the move will disregard typing and be super effective. So she's a dark dragon type. Let's say that she is using a dark move on a bug Pokemon, and obviously that is not going to be super effective. But when she is sent out and she has the ability Shapeshift and uses the move Manifest, then she will it will be, although the Manifest, the move type is dark type, it will be super effective on the bug Pokemon. But then after this turn, if you use Manifest again, it would not be very effective because it's a dark type move. It's because it's just returned to being a dark type move. But after this turn, if you use Manifest again, it would just be a dark type move. So yeah, I really like coming up with abilities. So more than Dex entries, I kind of come up with more abilities and kind of like the moves and signature moves. I know not every single Pokemon usually should get a new ability or move, so eventually I'll have to design something with a basic already existing ability. But I thought it was really cool, and also it's fun to consider how to come up with something interesting without possibly breaking the game. So that's it. So I hope you guys like Kokote and Kukanwa, and sorry for my pronunciations and all that kind of stuff, and the constant rambling. And yeah, I have a few more design ideas coming up, so hopefully when I get more time, I can upload again soon and show you guys some cool ideas. And I wonder what kind of design folklores and myths that we end up covering by the time this game releases, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, that would actually be used inside the game, and how different would it be? As far as I understand, I think the alligator humanoid, the Kuka influence is a possibility. I think some PokeTubers have been talking about it being an influence for Fuecoco, which I can kind of see. How deep that connection will go, I'm not so sure, but probably not as deep as this character. This Pokemon is pretty much completely based on that. But anyway, I hope you guys like this, and would you use it on your team if this was a Pokemon? And what would be your moveset that you wanted to learn? Alright guys, see you next time. Bye.